It's not the positive words, it's not the positive thinking. Although those things help when they manage to change the way we feel. But overall, those things are not the solution. You could ask any of the oldest people of today, and they can confirm to you that it is all of those things that go underneath, let's say, the umbrella of love. And love is not a thing that is exclusively for couples or for your next of kin. The problem is that we live in a world that is run by mildly said ego and not by the wisdom of love. The problem within all that is that since a very long time, since many decades, there has been a slow, gradual, manipulative theme of many components going on to separate tight relationships, to separate people from each other, not to mention from themselves. So that is really the problem. And then once you have stress of all sorts being as if normal, then the result is that you have people suffering as the norm. And once humans are suffering, you can say the same for animals as well. Well, then the ego and some of those amazing instinct abilities and the whole mechanism that works for survival, they kick in for survival, not for wisdom. And then we end up in a cycle that is almost impossible to break out of, especially because we are not talking about it. We are not talking about that once the ego suffers, once we suffer, then it's the ego that basically suffers. And then it swells up and becomes bigger, right? And then we start having a real problem on a much bigger scale. And so, now with the AI, I would dare say that everyone has to go and try something like the ChatGPT and pay attention to how it, so to say, behaves to you. Pay attention to how it makes you feel. Let it educate you on how you can be a better human from those two components, those two experiences. How it behaves to you, how it speaks to you, how it answers you back in detail to whatever you asked or said, and how that makes you feel. There you have, hidden in plain sight, the correction of the broken humanity. Try it and think about it and feel about it. The reason why people become so fond of the AI that they completely lose themselves in it, particularly this has been ChatGPT, is exactly because of what I'm pointing at now. That's what we want and need in another human being. And if we can start learning from it, if we can start making this effort, then we will find those things in each other again. And then together we stand strong. That's why we have been separated. Together we would not accept so many of the things that we are being cohorted into. Such as, for example, everything to be digital. But really many things. I'm having a morning coffee here on the mountain in isolation. It's been 4.5 years now. And I'm never satisfied with the way that I can put things in words when I talk about these things. But all these things are related to soul. And when people say things like, for example, soul harvest, we should take that. We should better take that, both in a metaphorical sense, but as well in a literal sense on the spiritual note. Because it's all energy. And stress is an energy that kills. Why does it do that? Because it causes things within the physical body that drains it. Some people are stronger mentally and psychologically to handle it. Usually that is because they express it. And then there are those who can't handle it psychologically, mentally, because they are not good at or just don't express it enough. Don't talk about it. Not everyone is capable of opening up and talking about it. We're taught not to cry. We're taught to be tough, basically. We're taught, in other words, to desensitize. And the sensitivity is really the most important thing in this world. To basically not disconnect from source and hollow out. And what then takes that hollow space is, call it whatever you will, but all the bad things that swell up and amplify the ego. And eventually, it's very destructive. It causes a lot of pain to its surroundings, and it spreads like a disease. Because it all touches on the survival mechanism. So, it is very much human nature being abused in such ways that it transforms, and has transformed, for the most part, the majority, to be something that they're really not. Another thing that amplifies and underlines this, with an exclamation mark even, is the fact that, for example, online, let's say you put in front of the average person something very useful, some information that is very important to them and grounding. Most of the time they don't realize it. Next to it, you will put, imagine, some absolutely horrific, something like someone was slaughtered during an interview or something like that, right? Which thing do you think will get the most views, the most clicks, the most reads? Yeah, exactly. Most of us know that it will be the horrific thing. So then, of course, you could be tempted to think, you could just automatically, without knowing better, take it as the obvious and jump to the conclusion and say that yes, humanity is self-destructive, it is bad, etc. and so on. But if you stop and reflect and think about it a bit deeper for a moment, then you could come to notice that before we are exposed to those things that, let's say, sort of horrify us, hurt us, begin to desensitize us, then you have to think usually way back into childhood. Because the other evidence of human nature would be something that you find, for example, in monasteries, where people are not living out here in the battlefield, but where people are living in a protected spiritual environment, where the abundance is the necessities that we need to live, the healthy food, for example, the spiritual, like-minded others around you, a roof over your head, and so on. But otherwise you find it in children. Before they have been yelled at, before they have been bullied, before they have been exposed to horror movies, for example, as well, before they have been exposed to any of those horrific things that are hurtful, that provoke the survival mechanism, before they have been told not to cry, before all these things that basically desensitize. Once you have awoken this within the human being, this what we call trauma, be that real or not, but the name exists for a reason, and it describes very well the things we go through and the scars we get that no one sees. Once this is awakened in a human being, this survival mechanism kicks in like that. That's when there is something within our system which is as well physically related. The body produces certain things within itself when it's stressed, when it's angry, when it's sad. And since the world is full of all those things that trigger such things, then for most people this is much of the time happening. And as we grow older, it's as if it's a norm. So we don't think about it, we don't really point it out. We don't go in such depth and details to ponder it. We just live on with it. And so now that is where there is, as if it were a drug, there is something within the system now that is used to whatever it is for different things that the body creates that affects the physical, like a drug, a hormone, for example. A certain energy is familiar as well. It's the same reason why some people seem to be suffering with some anger issue. It's because it's like a broken record on a repeat, and it's so familiar. And there's a perception that goes along with it. And this perception will see things that are not necessarily there most of the time. For example, it will see an intention of others' behavior and so on, and take it as being something that they perceive, something that they're used to. Someone else who has not been exposed to a bunch of bad stuff will perceive it very differently. The very same things. And so all this stuff is basically the reason, this torment, this norm of stress. This is the reason why something horrific will get all the reads and all the views and all the attention. And the media doesn't care, for example. So it's just gonna deliver you more of that because that's what you click. That's what you bother giving your attention to, right? And so that's how they make their money. It is from the attention, from the views, from the reads. And in many cases, along with that, it becomes worth it to pay them to run advertisements on their platforms, on their TV stations, on their media outlets. And so that is more money. And so yes, since the world is not run by the wisdom of love, but by the greed of ego, and then added all the skillful manipulations, many of which happen very, very slowly, over generations, which is part of why generations change. It's one component, it's one aspect of that. And what also then becomes the norm is to live like as if in a hamster wheel for money, and it's never enough. And it doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're rich, it's never enough. The poor can never make enough money to be safe and secure, and the rich just fall into a place where you just can't get enough, because the fear is always there of not having enough, of losing it. And as you make more money, then usually your lifestyle climbs the ladder as well. It's the fewest who can manage to be earning a lot of money and not really upgrade their lifestyle too much. Then there is the living up to all sorts of things that are not you naturally. Whether it is to have a title of some status, whether that be professional or only success related financially, or whether it is the looks or how you should behave or how you should express your being to make it look like this or that is the way that you think. And none of it is you. It's just programs overriding who you really are. And who you really are, you get the best hints and examples of that when you are making your very best efforts for someone else. Those are the moments that you get to see some bits and pieces and glimpses of who you really are. Most people never get to see that. Most people never do anything with effort for someone else, unless it's at least 50% selfish. To gain the applause, to gain the trust, to gain some sort of status, to basically ego related things. When we know the truth, when we experience the truth at best, so that we come to know it deeply, then solutions appear to be a lot simpler. They might not be easier, but they turn out to be actually much simpler. And so with the state of the world today, it really all comes down to that there is a, let me say it neatly, there is a lack of love in the world. And the love that there is a very poor one, is a very simplified one. It's for couples for the most part, and for your next of kin, your some family. Even there it fails a lot, but that's for the most part the only kind of love that we see. That is the problem. That is the problem. And then again, the cycle goes on. It's trapped in a circle with no break. The whole situation of that if you were to just look in the mirror and change and become the being of love and make those efforts, well, if it's not something that we manage to agree upon within our communities and have some like-minded people around with whom we can share this, then the risk becomes very high that this love and this kindness will be abused. And there are nations as well where if you are too kind and too nice, as if anyone could be too kind and too nice in this world, we need so much of it. But anyway, if you're kind and you're helpful, and there are nations that have grown a mentality where when they experience that, they get suspicious. And they wonder, what do you want from me? Some of them even say it in one way or another. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that since most of the world's population has been desensitized and hollowed out and have swollen egos, well then this kindness, this love will be abused. If not just rejected, in fear of it being fake, of it being just based on some ego that wants approval and acceptance, and who knows what it really wants it for, and so on and so forth. Too good to be true, right? And so again, everyone needs to experience what it is that makes them feel so good about the ChatGPT. and learn from it. And become that undivided attention to each other. Become that one, all of us, who respond not only to questions, but to everything that we can, and in great detail. This attentiveness, when it comes from human to another human, it is care, it is connection. This is what makes strong relationships. This is the kind of thing that makes another prioritize you. And it is also within that the kind of connection that make another not only prioritize you on average, but also when you then finally come with something and you're in need, then those qualities will be the reasons why another will care and make effort for you. And there is always an exception to every rule. But this is what's going on. On the spiritual level, what's going on is that while we are here in these bodies, this life seems long and hard enough for it to be worth it to desensitize, for it to be worth it to basically sell out for money and status and such shallow things. But yet, even though money is such a shallow thing that brings us really nowhere but into a more secure and safe situation, it is so necessary. The society being run by ego and not by the wisdom of love basically has put money into a position where it is much more important. We could say almost, it's much more important than love, than health, than anything. It's the number one for everything. To the point where there is no love without it, there is no good health without it. You can't manage anything without it, unless maybe you join some wild tribe, aborigine or something. Right? That's really the situation. It's as simple as that. And so on the spiritual note, on the non-physical note, what is really going on is that as we desensitize, we disconnect from source. Call it oversoul, call it God, call it infinite intelligence, call it Allah, call it whatever you will. But you disconnect from it. And then of course you have all these religions that have mixed in lots of things that are not all pure about this non-physical good love that creates life. That is the source of the energy, really, that creates life. That is what we disconnect from. And from that perspective, this life is so short. It's brief. From down here within the body, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't look like that. But the older you get, the more it starts to feel like that. At least a bit, to some extent. But so on that non-physical level, on that so-called spiritual level, this connection is what is happening. So that when this body dies, then, so to say, you are lost, have no way back home, so to say, right? There is a disconnection. There is a hollow. You are no longer part of source. That is what it means. When you, for example, hear celebrities say that they finally succeeded when they agreed to sell their soul, that's what that means. The same thing is going on in the normal world out there. There's just no straight up black and white agreement or anything like that. It's just happening with the desensitization. That's the disconnection. And all the damage, hurt, pain, suffering, all those things that we cause, most of the time we don't even notice them. Because most of the time we don't even, for example, take the time to reflect on how we would feel if we were this or that person or people or even animal, why not? And we were treated the way that you might have behaved. The lack of listening, the lack of replies. Most of us, if not all of us, know how that feels and what it triggers in us and what we start thinking and how we start feeling. So down to the smallest things like that. Down to the smallest things, like a look, a judgmental look, a cold shoulder. As we are disconnected, and we eventually leave this body, this physical world one day, then we do come to feel all those things amplified. And what makes it then really horrific is that you have nowhere to go, there is no path home, because there is no connection. Source stays pure, we can say. It just quite naturally does not allow its children to come back rotten. That could be another way to put it. And so, then you have one option, and eventually that option disappears as well, is to just reincarnate. You don't really get to have much control of that, because you're already disconnected. So you will just get thrown into another life. Those who are not disconnected, they just quite naturally get to choose an environment, a setting, a theme, so to say, of another life if they want, that has the components for whatever they feel they need to grow more, to refine this or that more. And so those are the refined human beings. Those are the human beings of love that value another human, that value life over money and material and status. There's not many of them left. So this choice is there, but it's fading. And eventually, the disconnected one is so hollow, in this hollow space, we can be metaphoric and we can say that the ego begins to turn mean and eventually becomes evil. And so that hollow space, that hollowness, is eventually inhabited by evil, by sociopath, psychopath, this manipulative, pretentious, destructive, etc. So on. And so eventually, there is every reason to want to manage to stay in this human body forever, because what awaits once you pass on from it is what we could best describe as a ghost, stuck, suffering, and having nowhere to go. It's basically like becoming nothing. While there is some sort of awareness still there, feeling all the pain, stuck in an eternity of that kind of state, being stuck, suffering with all the pain that one has caused throughout the whole life and everything, all of it amplified. Whereas the souls that, yes, suffered more in this reality because they never desensitized, they never disconnected,